Fire Radio.
Hey everybody, it's Rob, National Fire Radio with the Frontline Mindset. I am excited. I have a longtime friend with me since starting National Fire Radio back in 2018. I have gotten to meet a lot of firefighters from around the country. The most humble group that I get to meet is the people from New England. And at a Fools event, I believe that's where we first met, Pat.
Yeah.
I got to meet Patrick Smith with a bunch of other New England Fools under the direction of Rusty Ricker. Who, Rusty, I have not forget about you. I got your stuff back here, and I will ship it to you. I promise. All right, but anyway, Pat, we've met. Patrick Smith, welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you for having me. This is
man.
Amazing.
Yeah, I know that I'm working on the background, so you see my one uniforms hanging there with my wrapping paper stuff, and we already discussed the mess of notebooks that are back there. So, all right, Pat. Kind of for those who are out there that don't know you, just give me a quick rundown of who you are, where you work, and we'll start there.
All right, yeah, I'm Pat Smith, as Rob said. Been in the fire service for 15 years now. Started as a call firefighter in my own town, Marshfield. Moved up to full time. 2015 promoted lieutenant, then 2020 got made captain. Since taking over the training division just recently, which I'm trying to update and kind of move forward. But fire service has really been my life since I was a kid. I remember visiting my dad at the fire station when he was working a couple towns north. Grandfather was the chief of Marshfield, and prior to that was Weymouth, the same department my dad worked for. Marshfield is
3 generations then? 3
generations, yep.
All right, awesome.
So the Marshfield is 25-ish or so miles max south of Boston on the coast, but about the same distance away from the Cape. So right between Boston and Plymouth Rock. Population is about 25 to 30,000. 50 or 52 members right now. We have a chief, 2 deputies, and 4 12-man shifts. My shift is at 11 right now. And we do on average about 4,600 runs a year. So pretty busy for the area, minus some of the cities.
And that's out of one station, did you say, or 2?
3 stations.
3 stations, okay.
Yep.
All right. And on top of this, Pat, you've also worked for the Massachusetts State Fire Academy as an instructor as well.
Yeah, so I started in the academy February of 2017, I think. Started as an instructor, moved up to instructor 2, taught a lot with RIT, and pretty much everywhere I was all over the place. And actually last year, the year before, I made assistant coordinator for rapid intervention. So I do a lot of the scheduling and scheduled classes for departments, and Brad Quatra from Bellingham and I have been trying to update the program as much as we can and kind of move that forward as well.
I think that's amazing to hear, because I know there's a lot of rapid intervention programs that are out there that kind of stay stagnant, and we're still teaching stuff that we were doing in like 99 in the wake of, which is, had just recently passed, of the Worcester mass fire when we lost the brothers up there. And so much has changed technology wise, and just our approach to it, I think, has been, so it's good to hear that in the fire service.
Yeah, Mass was really progressive right around just prior to the incident in 99, and then afterwards there's a group of guys that actually still are around that kind of formulated the RIT program and made it what it is today. And we've just been little minor tweaks trying to update some of the skills and kind of bring things forward. And but I was saying it's a very, very good program, so it's nice.
Awesome. So, Pat, one of the things that we wanted to kind of hit on tonight is that we're both in this unique situation of being in charge of training and or having our hands in training in a smaller department with staffing issues, and just and kind of how your backgrounds prepared you for this, because really, it's just the books tell us one thing, but the reality of what we do is completely different. And I'm not just talking about like the 5 people on a hose line, the 7-man truck company that doesn't exist, or the 20 people that we're going to put on a banger to get it up to the 3rd or 4th floor, right? Like,
yeah.
So what's where do you want to start with this?
So I don't know. I mean, definitely the differences between, like, especially I went to the academy before I was hired full time. I was 2010. The state was kind of not in a recession, but the economy wasn't great, so they actually opened up the academy to call guys. I was one of two members in my class that were call members when I went through the recruit program.
What is a call firefighter for those who aren't familiar with New England?
So it's not volunteer. You do get paid. I forget how much it is. I think it's like $1,000 a year for us. So it's pretty much volunteer. But it's kind of foot in the door. A lot of the guys that got hired around my time started as callmen, and you can go to boxes, actual work in building fires, but for our town, you're primarily exterior. It's more support, changing out bottles, putting lights up, rolling hoses at the end, taking down ladders and all that stuff. So they do a lot of training, but it's guys that have full-time careers that want to help out and can't really or don't have the availability to get on full-time. There's a lot of departments around, especially South Coast and kind of Southern Mass that do it, and then out past Worcester, that are considered call.
And it could be different. Like, what was happening in your department. There's others where a call firefighter could be doing everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a very small call. I think there's only like 6 members left now. But yeah, so when I first went through the Mass Fire Academy with them, I was just a call guy. So I did one training a month for Marshfield, and then I went to at that point it was a 12-week career recruit program, and we were doing everything that the recruit program does, which is stretch 2.5, stretch for building fires. But we had like 4 people on the line. Obviously, when I got hired full time, we went through departmental training, and we had to do it too. It was myself and the other member that I was hired with, and I remember thinking back to myself how different it was, like especially just stretching, something as simple as stretching hoses or pulling up the hydrant with 2 members, and so it was really eye-opening. And since then, it's, especially when I started taking outside classes, there's a lot of people that teach non-academy ways of stretching hoses and all that stuff. And I mean, I understand 100% why they have to teach to a standard and all that stuff with the 4 people on the line. But then the challenges come in when you have 2 people and you're trying to do the same thing. So it's definitely, it's been interesting trying to formulate how to go about doing the same thing with half the members. And I'm sure just like you're running into the same issues.
Yeah. And there was a part of my career where, the struggle wasn't that there was only 2 or 3 of us doing the work. We weren't even allowed to train for it.
Really?
And I mean, I'm not talking like the last couple, but like, when I like the thought of like pulling a hose off the truck.
Yeah.
It was just like, it was such it was looked at as this arduous task.
Yeah.
So like, and even myself, I was like, well, all right, if it's going to be too much of a pain, then we won't do it. Like you didn't know what you didn't know.
Yeah. We've definitely run into that from time to time. My group right now, to be honest with you, I love my group. They're very motivated. So anytime we're like, hey, let's do a hose evolution or anything like that, they never really complain. I even ask sometimes, like, hey, what do you guys want to do today? And I think that one of the last times I asked that, they had suggested trying to, or basically seeing how much water we can flow out of the new engine, because not redesigned. It's we normally run 1250 gallon minute pumps, and we had a 1750. So the guys weren't used to that. Plus, we have the new ladder, so we're like, oh, let's go over to the fairgrounds. We'll flow some water and kind of just more mess around than anything. But they were like, yeah, let's lay 4-inch. Let's throw the ladder pipe. Let's do the blitz gun, the deck gun, anything you guys want. And they were very, very motivated, which is nice to see. But it is tough sometimes, because, and I know we talked about it prior to, but not only do you have not the staffing that we're not riding with 4 people, with 25 people doing all this stuff, especially for training. We have 10, maybe 11 guys, depending on the shift, because we lose one to dispatch right away. And
Oh, one's a dispatcher. Okay.
yeah, so because we're one of the only departments right now in our area that kept our fire alarm up, so we get the secondary PSAP, which is awesome. I mean, it helps out the community and all that stuff, and it helps out our job getting that information right away. But so every single time, and the guys will, I mean, it's the same everywhere. When there's food on the table or you're trying to train, that's when all the calls come in.
Yeah.
And that adds another factor where, hey, we just laid 200-300 feet of 4-inch or more. We threw the ladder and started flowing thousands of gallons a minute. And now a medical comes in. So lose 2 people on the box and then a couple guys on the engine. They'll come back after the call, but then a second medical comes in. Now we brought our 10 to 11 down to 6 or 7. And then sometimes even more, depending. So we're left with just a handful of people, and now there's guys missing the training, and it's not like we can break everything down and then hope later on we can just do it all over again. It's more of a, well, we're already flowing water, let's keep going. But now everything we're hoping no other calls come in, and you're taking a risk, especially throwing the ladder and laying all that line, that building fire doesn't come in. I know they don't happen in small towns as often as they used to, or as often as some of us would hope, but it brings in that extra factor of, you have to kind of think about, okay, if something big comes in or a report of building fire comes in, what are we going to leave behind? What are we breaking down? Who's going to break everything down? Who's the quickest at something? And let's just get on and go. And I've tried to explain that, like, hey, like, if we have the crosslays off, like, just disconnect them, leave them, and we'll steal them off another truck when we get them, because we're all going. So there's challenges that kind of are behind the scenes that
I know that I for some reason, the fear of stripping the crosslays off the rig and, in your hand lines, and we're a crosslay department, and we have a pre-connected 400 off the back.
Yeah.
So like one of the big struggles for me was, or how I overcame the struggle, was to make 200-foot hose bundles and just kind of toss them up on the top of the engine, or keep them in the staff car with me, just so I could, like, I can steal the nozzle pretty quickly, right?
Yeah.
And at least we're not, because I know that's, it is in the back of everybody's head as we're doing this. But then we found, thankfully we bought a bunch of Elkhart nozzles, so we just moved our secondary nozzles onto those hose packs to serve as the just in case. But like that is the thought process that has to happen when you're in this limited manpower staffing, and you want to affect good training.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely a struggle. It was eye-opening to me when I first started doing training on my group that I have now. But it's I don't know. It's luckily we've lucked out, especially recently. Most of those trainings that we did, especially the latter one, I think we only got 1 call, which is nice.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, when we're trying to either clean up, like we did hose testing, and every single time we do hose testing, the department just gets stripped, like, completely. And I remember we had 12 or 1,300 feet of 4-inch plus all the crosslays off an engine, and I'm sitting there waiting for it. I mean, it doesn't take that long, and the majority of the time is packing up hose. And I even joked, I looked at somebody, I said, as soon as we get that last piece of 4-inch on this truck, I said, we're getting all the calls. And sure enough, we were nonstop for a couple hours after that. And but anything we try to do, I mean, that's part of the business, though. But you just have to kind of either risk it, but also have a contingency plan, like you said, with the rolls. That's a great idea. I think I'll use that. So
let's kind of talk about this. How you're overcoming this. Like, what are some of the tips, tricks, and hacks that you've used in Marshfield to kind of come up with this? Because, like, how many ambulances are you guys cross staffing?
So we have 2 frontline ambulances. So 4 members are the primary pieces, which was actually a change that we made after COVID. The chief at the time, instead of having 8 members at the center and 2 at each outline station, he split up the department, so it was 4, 4, and 4, and which was an awesome idea, just for exposures. And then once obviously that was over, everybody kind of came back, but they liked the idea of splitting the town. Prior to that, it was P1 used to go out the door no matter what it was. If they were out, then P2 went out. So now it's P2 goes north, P1 goes south, and everybody's happy. But those two crews crossed off the ladder. So which brings in another kind of aspect of that, because if both ambulances are over, I kind of already have to split them and like, hey, let's get the ladder over there, just in case. But then if both of them are out, then I'm splitting my engine and one of us has to bring the ladder back. So it's literally just having a plan and kind of seeing what happens, and having a plan of like, hey, if this call comes in, like, and it's in my district and my engine is tagging a hydrant right now, then I tell engine 1 and engine 2, they're going to have to split the town for at least medicals. And if it's a fire alarm call, just quick disconnects and just go.
Yeah.
Like we have two engines with full complement of hydrant assist valves and hydrant bags and all that stuff. So if we leave one hydrant assist valve at the hydrant across the street, then it's not necessarily huge detrimental. But we're obviously going to try not to, but depending on timing and what the call is.
What other approaches, like, so when you're, as you've been doing this, do you break it down into smaller pieces to kind of make it more manageable? I mean, obviously, like you're talking before about a larger thing where you were flowing water. There's no easy way to do that. But like on some of the other stuff, how do you break it down? Because I know that's one of my things that I try to do. But like, what's your method to the madness?
It depends on the training. I've actually, for the past year or so, I've been trying to formulate how to redo we have monthly trainings. So now I'm in charge of kind of figuring out how to do that. So I've been trying to do kind of a crawl, walk, run version of it, where like one mandatory training a month on a specific topic is just a review, or bring everybody down for a PowerPoint, then review of the equipment and kind of have everybody there. It's a simple one where if it gets interrupted, we can just bring everybody back after the calls and do it. Then we progress from there. So one of the ones we did was chimney fire training. So we had a ladder review. So that's not necessarily huge detriment to calls, because we can toss a ladder back in real quick and have them go. Or we'll take it off a spare piece or the ladder itself or what have you. So then we did a ladder review, then chimney fire equipment review and location on every piece has chimney fire equipment. And then we did the setup of all the different equipment. And then the last training of that month was you get dispatched your first due to a chimney fire, and it's literally you dispatch it and you go. So in order to do that, you had a lot of people working, but I always kept one engine as kind of the frontline engine during the training, that no matter what call came in, where it was, they're going to go. Right. So engine 2 is the north engine. So if a district 1 call came in while they're doing the operation, engine 2 is just going to cover something as simple as that. But then obviously if a building fire comes in, you have to make it known like, hey, who's going to break down the ladder, who's going where, and kind of talk about it prior to. So
because that's there's some cool takeaways on that, because you're keeping everybody operationally ready for the fire. So you're already kind of putting that mindset into everyone. Yeah. And then 2, the assigned task of like, hey, Pat, you're going to get outriggers. I'll get the aerial device down, and once that's bedded, like there's that system in place for that. So everybody knows their role if that building fire comes in while we're in the middle of doing the training. So I think there's a lot to unpack there, and it's a good thing.
Yeah. And having that format, I mean, there's a couple of the trainings we're actually having a meeting tomorrow about it, and kind of formulate what we're going to do for 2024. Like everybody's going to grab a month and just write out the skill sheets and all that stuff with that same format. But there's going to be some that takes everybody to do, and then there's going to be others that takes 2 companies versus 1 company, but everybody just kind of rotates through. We have 7 miles of coast, so one of the trainings we do is boat training. So when I first became captain, I used to try to do the center and the north side, launch a boat on the north side, and then come back and launch a boat on the southern end, which is the beach station, to try to keep everybody kind of located. But then I quickly realized it's just as easy to bring everybody to one location and just have people cover. or have them cover the center while we're doing stuff, and then flip flop them. And it's, you automatically lose 2 people while they're out on the water. So you have them on radios and kind of make sure that if they're on a front line, like on P1 or P2, then somebody's going to jump up, and whether it be the engine driver, whether it be whoever has to, we can just mix match crews, which isn't ideal because everybody likes working with that one person. But during that short period of time, I mean, you're only asking for an hour, maybe 2 hours. It's not a huge ask to be like, hey, the driver of engine 2 has to jump on the ambulance for 1 call. So they're all pretty.
A little camaraderie to build there, though, because everybody's embracing the suck together. So
yeah, exactly. So it's funny. It's when you're going through it. I mean, especially a lot of the guys. We have a very young department, much like around here. We had a huge turnover, so we have a very young department, very motivated, and they'll have a lot of fun with it, and they'll start throwing, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? And depending on timing and calls and stuff, I'll be like, yeah, absolutely, we can jump this in, or like we'll take the boat out, or if they ask like, hey, can we do training on this? We'll add trainings to it. Not necessarily the huge evolutions, but they seem to kind of build that camaraderie, and everybody gets along and enjoys it. And after that chimney fire training, it was last year, November, December last year. Less than a month later, we actually got a chimney fire. It was a nothing fire. It was just typical old chimney fire, and it was just identical to what we had set up. Identical. Right. And I remember he's now a lieutenant. He was one of the senior guy, actually the senior guy on my group at the time, walks up to me and he's like, I said, well, that went well. He's like, yeah, almost like we just did it last month. So,
yeah.
But, yeah.
You said something before too. I thought I wrote it down, but it was a good line. Like, what we teach in the academy is not what's going to work out in that short or staffing limited fire department, right? And everybody's short staffed. I mean,
yeah.
Having been in the, as an instructor at the academy, because like, I mean, there's times even for myself where I'm like, I want to hate on the academy. I want to hate on whatever book they've chosen to use and the people who wrote it. Yeah. But like, can you speak on that a little bit?
So, I mean, we all know there's a bunch of different evolutions. And one that comes to mind was actually 2.5. I remember stretching a 2.5 up to like the 4th floor of the burn tower, and just remember, oh my God, I hate this thing. And getting back and hearing people talk about 2.5s, and a lot of towns, and I've heard a lot of people that haven't necessarily gone to conferences or anything like that resist 2.5. And I'm just honing on 2.5, but there's obviously plenty of other examples we can talk about. But the 2.5, a lot of people don't like it because you're like, oh, it needs 4 or 5 people to do. So it's the 4 or 5 people on a 2.5 for us isn't going to work. So we got to figure out a different way. And that's one of the things when Rusty took me on as an instructor, that my first station was 2.5. So I wanted to kind of have people be comfortable with it. It was my biggest goal, was have people flow it by themselves, talk about the pressures, because a lot of the old school guys aren't necessarily understanding of hydraulics. So they just throttle up to what they think is necessary. And I told them, like, hey, if the 2.5 does have a smooth board, it's not going to need 125 PSI like all the other lines. Right. So first of all, you have to rely on your pump operator. And if they're giving you the right pressure, you can absolutely flow the thing by yourself. So I have everybody, smallest to largest, flow by themselves, talk about handling, talk about different ways of overcoming pinch points with 2 people. And then during the evolution, that first one, it was down in Connecticut with Rusty, is I wanted everybody to stretch the 2.5 with just 2 people. And they did it. And a couple of the crews were had the thing on the fire in, I think, 45 seconds.
Yeah.
And that was charged. They did a fantastic job. And I remember there was a couple of the city guys from a city nearby that came up to me, and one of them I'm still really good friends with. And they talked about, they're like, yeah, we're so used to just picking the thing up and just going, and we've never really had to worry about body mechanics or anything like that. So it's amazing to see that you can still do it with half the people. Not that we want to do it with half the people. We always should always push for more staffing, but we have to. I mean, we can't. If it's 2.5 fire, it's a 2.5 fire. An 1 3/4 is just not going to work. So if you need more water, then you got to figure out. And that's just one of the examples. Some of the other ones, I mean, ladders and.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in quick too. Like it's as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about to my, I'm 16 years old and I'm going through what New York State's program back then was essential firefighting.
Yeah,
and it was like, or firefighting essentials, maybe it was like a kick-ass program. I mean, it was just like rootin' tootin' firefighting.
Yeah.
And they taught, like, when we had to use a 2.5, they had a nozzle with, like, the older ones with the loop handles on the outside. Two people grab a hold, and I just remember, like, they put this emphasis on, like, oh yeah, when we're hold on to it, and like it was more of a fear of almost like when somebody who shoots like a shotgun that's like a feather lighted shotgun, and it they get a lot of recoil from it, and now they're scared of recoil and everything. But I feared the crap out of that thing to the point where there were times where we didn't pull it. We probably should have, but like once again, you don't know what you don't know until somebody was like, hey, this is how you can this is how you flow this is how you do it, and it's not taught. It's just one of those things. That's a great example. You were going to jump in about ladders too, I think, before I cut you off.
So like different things with ladders. I mean, my favorite thing is the 2.5. I just, like I said, there's a lot of misconceptions out there for smaller departments. I mean, I've heard a ton of different excuses as to why people can't pull it. Not for my job. Again, my job is great. But I've heard a bunch of people, the different excuses as to, like, hey, it really shouldn't have a smooth bore on it. You should have a combo because otherwise you're not going to be able to control it. I'm like, that's one of the kind of beginning phases of why I wanted to make sure that people were comfortable with it. Because I'm like it all of a sudden light bulb moment. I was like, oh, that's because they were taught to just charge every line at 120, 130 before a lot of them went to the academy and learned hydraulics. And that's just what they're used to. So these guys were trying to pull a 2.5 with a smooth bore, charged at almost double what it needed, and obviously it's gonna beat them. They're gonna get launched. I mean, everybody's seen people launch on the line when it gets over pressurized. So I wanted to kind of, especially that first training, and that's where, like, I love hose stuff, and especially short shaft hose stuff. But that was one of the big ones with me, is I want people to be comfortable with that. And then we teach, obviously, to IFSA and FPA, which is awesome. The academy I teach for is very progressive with it, and it's world renowned. We have visitors from everywhere, and it's great. And it's a good base, but some people can't necessarily throw ladders the way they're taught there when they get back, because they just don't have the staffing. So it's good to know what should get done and all that stuff. And then kind of when you get back to the department, it's almost like, well, we have to figure it out. I mean, we've all done things that we know NFPA or IFSTA would have an absolute field day with, and been like, oh my God, you can't do that. And it's like, well, you gotta, like, not crazy stuff, but just normal short staff stuff. So
yeah, well, and they may have the opinion on what we can and can't do, but the reality is mom and the 3 kids are depending on us because they're trapped. The trapped civilians are still there.
Exactly.
Like, and they don't have the book, they don't have the standard, and they don't really give a shit about it because they want us in that house, getting them the F out of there. Like they want that line inside. So I think and that's where, like I said, it's challenging because, you'll in the fire service, you probably can come across the people who can cite the standard, almost like they're some kind of secret NFPA or IFSTA police.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, IFSTA doesn't have that. Like, it's not a branch of them, or NFPA, but like, they're out there.
Yeah.
And like I said, the citizens are the ones that we're there for. So we have to really focus on the best practices to get us to them.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I try to, especially teaching, no matter which organization I'm teaching for, whether it be for the Fools or the academy or just regular trainings, is I try to tell everybody, like, it's unfortunate when you're short staffed. There's people arriving with one people in an engine or a ladder, 2 people, 3 people, whatever you're handed. It's I try to kind of preach them when a house catches on fire and a woman's standing outside saying her kid's trapped on the second floor. They're not going to accept the excuse that there's only 2 people arriving on that engine. They're expecting what they see on TV, the FDNY or Chicago Fire or Boston Fire pulling up and saving the day. And they don't understand the challenges that take place when you're arriving and you have to do the work of 4 people. And for us, it's, I heard like, well, we don't get fires. Well, you can't arrive on scene and tell a woman like, oh, we don't have that many fires. Their house is on fire right now, and they expect us to train and be proficient in our job. So there's no excuse for that. It's training overcomes that lack of real world experience. And I'm sure you've looked at the numbers, and everybody says like, hey, fires are down. They're only down 3%. So they're really kind of stagnant right now. And I get that it feels like we're down, but if somebody's house catches on fire in our town, they're calling us. They're not calling anybody else. So we still have to train for that moment, not what we do 75% of the time, which is obviously medicals. We have to be proficient at everything. So
this just popped in my head here, but the ambulances, they have fire equipment on them as far as like an SCBA and their turnout gear and stuff, or?
Yeah. So both ambulances actually, since even before we split the town, they had, so if you were prior to 2020, if you were on paramedic 1, you'd put your gear on P1. It has SCBAs and a set of irons. Now everything has SCBAs on it, and irons, but then they'll grab their gear and jump over to the ladder if it's a ladder call for them, or keep it on the ambulance.
Well, where I was kind of going with this, just because I think that, like my fire department, we have, we've got like a hook and a can, we've got a set of irons, and the SCBA and the gear compartment. But like, do you have any tips, tricks, and hacks on how you approach that from the ambulance? Because I think that sometimes, like, well, I would love to go to a fire on a fire truck, 100%. I'm not going to tell you that I want to go on the ambulance. Yeah. But like, what's your approach to a house fire on the ambulance when you've got to go to work?
So actually, as officers since 2015, I haven't been on the ambulance. But when I was, and actually with what I have the guys do now, is every single fire is different, and that's one of the things that I never really understood until I was in the seat. I still remember the fires I went to on the ambulance and thinking like, hey, why am I even on the engine sometimes? Like, hey, why are we splitting crews? Like, why am I going with this person? My driver's going with that person. Like, it never really dawned on me until a couple of the fires I pull up. I'm like, you have to split the crews just out of the sheer nature of what we're doing. I mean, my driver ended up grabbing the hydrant, and I'm looking at him like, I have to split everybody. Like, I need an officer on the first floor supervising the overhaul. I needed an officer on the second floor supervising the extension and double checking everything. So the only chance was to split crews. So with the ambulance, they'll arrive. I try to have them, and there was one event it was one of my actually second or third fire as a captain. I completely admit I made mistakes, and things I shouldn't necessarily have done. And we talked about it later, and obviously guys are guys, and they'll never let me forget it, but it's something I won't ever do again. But if we're arriving together, like my engine 3, and one of the ambulances, I'll have them either grab the hydrant and tag our hydrant so we can stay together as a crew and go up to the fire, which works out pretty well. And it was more just an idea I had because of placement. I wanted to make sure that they're at least a hydrant away so they're not getting blocked in by 4-inch in case one of us gets hurt and needs an ambulance. Or when we pull up and there's a civilian and they need it. I wanted them out of the way because there's too many times where we assume it's a false alarm, a smells and bells call, so the ambulance pulls up right on the bumper of the engine, and now they get trapped. But as far as assignment goes, it depends on how many. If we're all in town, I might have one of the ambulances start throwing ladders and be exterior just in case there's a medical, or not a medical in town, but a medical at the fireground.
Right.
And then if there's only one, they might be split between the ladder and the ambulance, or I'll have them pair up with another engine, and depending on the fire, and kind of go in. They get their assignment on arrival. We have had them just kind of act like a truck company and go in and search and stay together.
Yeah, I have to say that like, you're coming back from the hospital and the box drops,
Yeah.
And they get there first. I mean, like, what's your expectation maybe of that ambulance crew operating together? They're like, obviously got to beach the ambulance out of the way, for all the reasons you listed, and plus not to block the scene up. But like, what do you want from them, or like, if you were on the ambulance, what's your goal as like a senior riding member to do? Because this is the part where I think a lot of departments, this is a conversation that needs to happen, but we don't talk about it because it's an ambulance and it's not sexy.
Yeah, I know exactly. And we don't necessarily shy away from those conversations. Like I said, when I first got on, I'm like, hey, look, if you're on the ambulance, you're arriving with us, I want you at the hydrant, just helping out with the hydrant. And it's worked out well, with the exception of that one incident. But it's never really, and it's something I'm definitely going to discuss, is what their expectation is of arrival. I would hope and I would expect, and again, my guys are very progressive, very smart. I would hope that they'd arrive, obviously beach the ambulance out of the way, get it out of the way, and do what they can without, obviously, the equipment. They only have a set of irons. They don't have a can. We've had fires where there's a chandelier burning, and the ambulance crew went in with their dry chem extinguisher that's required by OEMS, and just one little pump and put it out, and we're good. But if it's a room and contents, it's going to depend on their comfort level, their training, and the circumstance. If they're arriving and then a woman's like, "Hey, my kid's in that window right there," and it's a first floor window, I mean, they can absolutely vent or search that window and go with the gear that they have. But I think the biggest thing is communication to us, and that's one thing that has been mentioned a couple of times, even first arriving engines, just that initial report and the initial what we're doing, the can reports. The ambulance can absolutely give the can report. Hey, it is a working fire. I tell them there's nothing wrong with striking a box. We've had one. It was unfortunately his own house. He was on the ambulance that day, and his garage caught on fire. Yeah, and he was first on scene. He beat everybody, obviously, very quickly, and struck a box. And there was no questions asked. He's a senior guy. He's very smart, and I try to make sure that they're comfortable enough that they can take command initially, or strike a box if it's a working fire, and they know what needs to get done, or at least communicate it to me. And if my guys, no matter who it is on my group right now, if they're saying yes, it's a working fire, I might strike the box before we get there. And striking a box for us gets us any off-duty available member. So you might get 2 people, you might get 20. It depends. For now, with our new run cards, it actually gets us RIT on the first alarm, and 3 engines covering each station from mutual aid. And that's brand new to us. That's within this year.
Yeah.
But so I try to empower them, and it's definitely something I'm going to communicate a lot more after this conversation, is just take the situation, communicate back to me, strike the box if needed, and do what you can. I mean, we're not asking you to throw ladders to the second floor in vendor search if all they have is a foldable ladder or what have you, or go and do a search.
Yeah. Position the striker next to the building.
Yeah, it's do everything you can and make sure. Yeah, communicate with the civilians outside. Like if it's their home and they're like, "Where's the fire engine?" Communicate with them. Communicate with us.
I think so like that was going to be my question, was what does strike a box mean in Marshfield, and explain it, because I want, as an officer, thinking firefighters, and especially if I work overtime, I have to I like to remind people too, like, because the expectation is out there that if you think we need something, if you screw up and make a bad call, I'll defend you. We'll talk about it, but like, it ends with me, and it starts with me, because I would rather have somebody make a bad decision. And when I say that, I mean, like, they got smoke showing out, they think it's a working fire, and they might, for us, like, put a second alarm in, and then we find out it's like some very bad food on the stove.
Yeah.
But I'm okay with that, because if they don't do it, or they're afraid to do it, like we said, like, you made a mistake and you're talking about it. Like, we can make mistakes and it's okay, but I need to put that confidence that I will always have their back.
Yeah.
Unless it's something completely asinine. They're getting on the radio and they're like, we need California tankers here, an airdrop of some sort.
Yeah.
I don't know. Something ridiculous like that. But yeah, that's different.
A couple, just real quick, a couple of the officers I've worked for, one in particular, just amazing officer. But he's come up, especially when I first got promoted, he came up and questioned a couple of the decisions I made. And he's always said, he's like, I'm not asking you to defend he's like, if you have justification for it, he goes, that's all I need. He goes, if you make a decision, justify it. He goes, whether I think it's right or wrong or indifferent, he goes, if you can justify a decision, it was the right decision at that time. And that's one thing I've tried to communicate to everybody. It's, if you make a decision, no matter what it is, whether it be automatical or a fireground or anything, if you're justifying it, then that's okay. But if you have no justification for it, if you're anything like, that's when those questions are going to start. He was great. There was a couple of things that he questioned. He's like, hey, why did this happen? And I said, it was this person, like this, we saw this, we saw that, we saw this, and that was the decision I made. Okay, that's all I need. Because he was getting questions from somebody else asking him, like, hey, can you find out why this happened? And it's nothing drastic, but again, it's justification for any decision, and you're good. And if you make a mistake, then it's a training opportunity afterwards, as long as it's nothing outrageous where anybody got hurt or killed. So
right. And then once we go back to the beginning here, let's flip over my notes. You've done a lot of work with RIT.
Yeah.
I know in New York, for some reason, it's probably because of the FDNY, but we call it FAST, same thing. What do you, trying to think of, where does your mind have to go when you're going to start, if you're starting out and getting into RIT, or if you're on a RIT, like, you're new to the job, you're old to the job, whatever it is, like, where does your mind have to be at when you're doing RIT deployments? Because I know there's a lot on the line, but a lot of us sometimes, like, it's not the prize thing on the fireground, because you're probably not going to work. Hopefully you're not going to work.
Yeah. So we try to, so again, Mass's program is actually, it's amazing. And we have people from all over that come and teach with us, and a great group of instructors. I have guys, have actually been on your show too. And, from Boston, from everywhere around. And, we try to tell them, like, the preparedness is the biggest point.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully when you get there, hopefully you're not going to have to go to work. But be ready to go to work. Dress appropriately for us too. And coming from a small town, I try to tell them, like, hey, if we go mutual aid somewhere, or if you're having mutual aid come in, dress the part, be ready for the part, and think worst case scenario. Have your gear ready, have all your tools. And then the big thing is think constantly on the fireground. And I especially teaching with Rusty and going around, it's like just doing like a station. One of the last times I taught, I did 360 and size up. And it's like, all right, if you hear this radio transmission or this radio transmission, the 16 key trigger phrases, things should start popping off in your head and be like, oh, like this might be going south, and be ready for it. But until then, think about every single action that you do has to be beneficial for those inside. Once you get activated, there's not going to be any, like, all the breathing techniques and all that stuff. If that happens, those might go out the window, because you're like, oh, like you just heard either somebody call a Mayday, or somebody from a neighboring community call a Mayday, and it's like, it's very difficult to come down from that. We had an incident, one Mayday in our town, and what wasn't anything crazy, just roof collapse. And I still remember just that feeling of being in fire alarm and hearing it. And again, we don't know the situation. We just heard the radio transmissions, and it immediately, like, oh my God, like it was just very, very eye opening. And that's actually what got me into RIT. I wanted to learn about it and kind of be prepared for it. But just that, I know there's a ton of different classes on it, ton of different the articles on it, but just having that kind of RIT readiness.
I just if we can kind of back up a little bit, you talked about the 16 key fireground 16 key phrases, trigger phases, right?
Yep.
And I had never heard that before, so like I'm putting myself out there at something, and I just kind of, as you were talking about this, I hit it. Not putting you on the spot here, but do you have them off the top of your head?
So actually, thanks to Rusty and Taylor's Tins, he hands these out. Actually, I believe Joe Minahan was the first one to make these, or both of them can join, but I carry this in my wallet. So it doesn't have the percentages in there, but it's.
I got them here on my phone, so we can talk about them.
Yeah,
but
so
hit it up, because I think this is something, like I said, I didn't think we'd be going down this road, but it's kind of neat, because like I said, I had no idea.
Yeah. So it's there's zero visibility. There's fire above our heads. There's fire below us. Give us more line. We've not found the fire yet. We're running out of air. It's a hoarding house. Flashovers occurred. Ceiling or roof collapse. Lost multiple windows. It's really hot in here. We're backing out. Our exit is blocked. We're sending firefighters out with a problem. Holes in the floor or floor collapse. A lot of sprinkler heads activated, and command lost communications with crews. So that came from Project Mayday, Don Abbott, and his study. And it's something that we've added to a lot of the programs in mass, and it's in one of the lectures, my original lecture, and then the one that Joe and I did together. It's in there. It's pretty much, it's one of those things that we kind of try to drive home. And it's when Don Abbott dissected all the audio from the X amount of years that he studied Maydays and put all the statistics together. It was like one of them I remember was 57%. So 57% of the audios that he listened to had this transmitted over the air prior to the Mayday. So it's one of those things he compiled, and I think it's great. It's one of the really, really big take homes from that study, is as an incident commander, or specifically as the RIT. And for us, going mutual aid or having mutual aid come in, one of the things we try to teach is turn that radio on, listen to the fireground from dispatch. And as you're arriving on scene, you should be listening to what's going on inside. And some of those are kind of like, people look at those and they're like, yeah, that one's obvious. Like, things are going south. It's like, but if you look back at anybody's audio, anybody's fire, I guarantee you at least one of those was said. There's a couple of those that were said at a neighboring community. And it's just like while it's happening, it doesn't necessarily have the same effect. You're like, unless you know them. And it's like afterwards, you're like, oh my God, I said 3 of those. And there's been fires where multiple have been said, and then all of a sudden Mayday occurred.
It is chilling to me, because I reading them on their own and into this context, it's very specific.
Yeah.
So we're geared toward it. We are geared towards it. But now I'm thinking about these fires where we've walked away from, and we've been like, oh, man.
Yeah.
And it's literally something that I got chills, because like you said, they're used in 2s and 3s, and it's so almost like there's a sense of control. So like it's not panic when they're saying it. Or it's slow build.
And that's the thing is, like, and I remember talking to people in one class and having somebody chime up, and they're like, no, like I want to hear them, like if they say that, like I want their voice to be kind of like amped up and say that cool, calm, collective. And there's pros and cons of both sides of it.
Mm-hmm.
Every radio transmission should be cool, calm, collective. You listen to one of the audios that we use is I can't remember his name, the guy that landed on the Hudson. And he's just very, very cool, calm, not panicked, just very matter of fact. No, we're going on the Hudson. All right. So there's benefits of having somebody that's in trouble like that, because you can communicate with them. but it's not necessarily that easy. There's ways when we talk about one of the programs that we teach for the state is the dispatcher program, how the dispatcher can help. And you listen to a couple of the examples, and the dispatcher actually starts asking the down firefighter questions to calm them down. But the benefit of having the other end is if I, especially coming from a small town, if I hear the panic in somebody's voice, I know what they're going through. Like you listen to somebody who's just a solid firefighter and all of a sudden they're panicked, you know something bad's happening and you can hear it. And especially if they're starting to make those radio transmissions prior to something, you know what they're going through because they're never like that. So I think it creates that mindset of being able to understand what they're going through and understand that it's not just them saying like, oh yeah, there's fire above our heads. Like, oh no, like it's getting hot in there, you know? So,
Yeah.
And that's one thing, one of the Fools instructors, Bart Davis from Worcester he was the one that chimed up when I was teaching that. And it's an amazing point and it's something I never really thought of, but that helps with our original point of where does your mind have to be? And you have to be constantly thinking and constantly trying to put yourself in. If engine 2 is on the second floor and they're saying all these things, like what are they going through and what can I do to benefit them? Simply throwing a ladder for egress. I tell people like ladder the building. And if something happens and they have to bail out and all of a sudden they bailed out and you're looking and you're like, what just happened? A whole crew just jumped down a ladder, but they're good. That's a successful RIT operation in my view and everybody else's view.
Yeah.
It's just something as simple as that. And just, again, thinking everything you can do to benefit the firefighters inside. So it's not just that getting dispatch as RIT and kind of slouching in your chair and being like, oh, I'm RIT. All I'm going to do is stand and look like a shepherd in the front yard with my New York hook. And it's you check in, and it's that proactive RIT that they're teaching is check in, do a 360, soften the building, constantly work. And it's something actually I'm writing a paper on now is trying to the benefit of having the standardized training and trying to get it out to everybody. And so when we go mutual aid, we're operating the same way. Because if we go mutual aid to another town and somebody's like, hey, like pull a 2.5 to the rear, it's going to happen. But if we go mutual aid as RIT and they're expecting one way of RIT and we're giving them another way, like the old school TARP or anything like that, like it's getting everybody on the same page was the idea of having the program in the state. And I think it's a great step forward of getting everybody on the same page so we're operating the same way and we can intermingle, and 2 people from my town and 2 people from the town northwest can be a 4-person RIT and understand
train the same.
Yeah. So RIT's definitely a challenge. I love teaching for the program, and the administration side right now has opened my eyes to a lot. And it's a lot of fun, and it's definitely the program. I mean, I love teaching everything. Obviously hoses, anything, and just kind of get myself out there. But RIT's definitely where my passion was. So it still is.
I remember people telling me that, one of the departments I volunteered with at one point, they didn't want to send young members to RIT or fast training because they didn't have enough experience yet.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, they're not experienced enough. And I was like, it was interesting because I just got done with, at the whatever point it was like the career fire academy. And I had a guy who never was a fire, like he got hired off the civil service list.
Yeah.
He did not volunteer, and we taught him RIT because that's part of the curriculum. So like, what's the, there's these nuances. Do you agree with that mindset? Because I've always thought like what happened, like, well, one, I know that there's a very big amount of, a large percentage of down firefighters that are saved by their own crew. So like first and foremost, I think it's really important for the guy that's working next to me, whether he's 15 years on or 15 days, to have that knowledge of how to get me out of the building. God forbid something happens, right? Yeah.
So that's one of the benefits of so I actually for the paper I'm writing, I actually reached out to one of the guys that formulated the program for the state, and I asked him because every recruit that comes through the state academy has 2 days of RIT. And so before they graduate, and it's not part of the Fire 1-2 program. It's not required, which I think, I mean, obviously I believe we share the same opinion on that. But
yeah, I was gonna say, I think we're on the same page here, bud.
Yeah. So, but the best part is, I mean, Mass runs two recruit programs through one campus every 5 weeks. So they're 10-week programs. So there's 2 classes every time, and there's 24 to 30 students each time. And they've been running since I've been there. They've been running nonstop. And then the 2 other campuses have one class every 10 weeks. So all 3 campuses are running nonstop. But every recruit that comes through gets 2 days of RIT, which I think is super important. There's other programs that are designed for others that doesn't necessarily have it because it's not part of the standard. And I think, to your point, I think everybody needs to know RIT, whether it be actual RIT skills or the saving ourselves skill, which encompasses RIT too. Because not only do you have to call a mayday if you're in trouble, you have to do stuff to survive. So as we have a 2-day program that we teach on the road for just saving ourselves skills. And it's one thing that, looking at the numbers, like you said, through Don Abbott's study, 90% of maydays are resolved by nearby companies or the firefighter themselves. Only 7 are resolved by RIT. But that being said, it doesn't negate RIT skills. Because like you said, I want the guy next to me knowing how to get me out. And that 7% is the, oh my God, like nobody else can help. Like I need RIT in here. So I think it's something everybody should take. And when I teach a class, I tell them I relate it back to CPR. I hate relating anything in the fire service back to medical stuff, but obviously we have to do it. But every 5 years we have to re-up in CPR. And the little logo on the corner of the card wants to maybe make some more money, or we can't use the same book every 5 years, so we got to update something. So every 5 years they make you buy a book and get a new card, and it changes from whatever to all the numbers change and different studies.
Yeah,
I tell them RIT's the same way. If we got a huge, I see a lot of students that come back and take RIT classes, whether it be RIT or SOS or our new program RIT on a Fire or anything like that, or coming in and taking pools classes and taking our RIT stuff. And we see a lot of people coming back. I tell them it's one of those things where, like, if I take Officer 1, that might be the only time I take Officer 1, because then I get certified. I'm certified Officer 1 and I'm good to go.
And you're doing it every day.
Yeah.
It's not a perishable skill.
Yeah.
The RIT is, though.
Yeah. So I tell especially the recruits, that's the beginning of their career. They're on year 1 of their career. 30 years down the road, if you get assigned a RIT and one of your members goes down and you haven't done it in 30 years, it's going to be one of those things where it's like, that's going to weigh on you. Like, hey, I messed up the conversion, or we had one student who I love when allowing them to make mistakes and kind of talking about it afterwards. And I remember putting the dummy, the down firefighter mannequin on the 3rd floor and have them go in and get them. And they're in full blackout shields. They can't see anything, and they're new. So they unclip the regulator, grab the RIT bag, they unclip the regulator from the mask, and then they didn't realize that they put the down firefighter's regulator back in the mask and twist it on. Well, it took, I think, 5 different teams to get that down firefighter out of the building, which on average it does take 16. So technically four teams of 4. But it took up until I think it was the 3rd team. The leader always has a clear face piece with a thermal imager and kind of guides everybody, and just kind of working on that communication. And finally he said, hey, Searcher 1, can you double check that regulator? It looks like it's their own. And sure enough, it was. But it had been 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. So I talked to them like, hey, like 20 minutes of suffocation. Like, if you were that person that tossed that regulator on a down firefighter, not realizing it wasn't the RIT bag, and just, oh yeah, okay, and drive them out, and then you realize that they weren't breathing that entire time, like, that's going to weigh on you for the remaining years of your career. So it's one of those things where we want to send the A team in, and we want everybody to drive to be that A team. throughout their entire career. So I try to educate people and try to stress the importance of coming back and taking classes, try to stress the importance of having fun with the training and learning, because we don't want to, we don't want them going through and having like drill school type stuff. Like we want to have fun with them. They want to, like, if they're enjoying it, they're going to want to learn more, and they listen to you a lot more rather than that kind of other version of teaching. And we, like I said, we've seen people all over. We had a bunch of mass kids that I've seen through the programs and seen consistently come up to one of Rusty's programs up in Bath, right under fire. And we had a blast with them. I mean, we had, it was just a fun day. Now we've brought a similar program back to Mass too. So
can you, Writ Under Fire, when I say Writ Under Fire, I'm thinking of ISFI. I took the Writ Under Fire at Firehouse Expo with the guys. Yeah. There's predominantly people from Chicago.
Yeah.
And I was not passionate about being on a fast team.
Yeah.
That class changed my world, because there was a bunch of, pulpit pimp tricks that I learned along the way, of like things like, well, this will be good, like you should try this, or on YouTube somebody showed me this trick. Yeah. And then when I was in a live fire environment with a down firefighter trying to do this stuff,
yeah,
it was hot.
Mm-hmm.
And that room did not offer any forgiveness. And yeah. I remember losing my digital dexterity and being like, I have just lost digital dexterity. I am now in gross motor brain.
Yeah.
And I could not undo the strap, the waist strap. Like I was taught in New York State to no fault, right? Like do a pack conversion. And like these thumbs could not grab and disconnect and then go through and reconnect. Like it was just, I was stumbling.
Yeah.
Is your Writ Under Fire similar to that?
So actually,
is it different?
So the coordinator, Brad, and I are going to go to IFSI next year. We got the money for it. And we're going to go take that class to try to bring stuff back. Our version of it, so it's been around for a little bit. It was originally called Operational Writ Leader. And what I remember when prior to when I started traveling and met you guys and everybody else, I was just taking state classes. And I think there's like 400 or 500 state classes. I got through about 80 of them. And the number one class I took was Operational Writ Leader, because I remember I took every writ class I could. And then when we did this, I didn't know what to expect. There was a sim lab portion, there was a lecture portion, and then day 2 was live fire. I'm like, this is gonna be cool. And it's the same thing. Like it adds that, oh my God, like I remember being the lead and we're going down the stairs. We do a 180 and the whole back wall of the basement was going. I'm like, oh, like crap, like this is new. Like, so it just adds that kind of, that environment that a lot of people say that you can get that stressors up by yelling at students and all that stuff to get them amped up and get their blood pressure going. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. We got to add stuff like that, the live fire, the zero visibility, and that kind of, oh shit factor, but help them, walk them through it and build that confidence so they can actually do that. So our program, we just redid it because we got rid of the SimLab portion. Actually, there's a station on the fast board, the FEP system, and a couple other ones that we introduced. It's called Advanced Writ now. But day 2, we pretty much kept similar. We just tweaked a couple of the scenarios, but we start off the day with a very similar, like a simple scenario to show that, like, hey, sometimes all you have to do is guide the person back to a line and they can get out by themselves. And that's your Mayday. And everyone's like, huh. And then we build it up from there. And then see how the students are going and kind of tweak. But so it's definitely, it's one of our biggest, we got a abundance of feedback from it. But there's certain things like we can't necessarily do, which is we can't have live people be the down firefighter because of IFSA and MPA and all that stuff. So we have mannequins. So we try to make the most realistic or have the most realistic mannequins, the ones that are actually heavy with actual structure to it. But like you said, we see people struggling once they get in that zero visibility environment of just simple things of, like, we've had students come back and take every single RIT class and they forget to tie off the rope, or they forget to do this or forget to do that because that added stressor, like you talked about, where the thumbs just won't work. And it's something we try to teach them, and so they're prepared for it. But it's also one of those things where we have to build up that confidence. So when they get to that level and their heart rate hits that level, the cognitive thinking just goes out the window. From the, I forget what study it was on combat and all that.
Grossman. Yeah.
Yes. Grossman study. So we try to tell them that, like, hey, this is what's going to happen to you. So this is why we build that muscle memory. This is why you should train on it as much as you can, even though hopefully you never have to do that. But not only in a burn building, when there's live fire, your heart rate's going to hit the roof. But think about that in a real life scenario. And we've talked to people. There's a large number of instructors that have had personal experiences or have been involved in RIT. So we try to talk to them about what they went through and their personal experience, so they can bring that to the table and have at least try to prepare some of the students for that, or pretty much anybody, whether it be your own job or classes or whatever. You try to prepare them that, hey, this is what's going to happen. This is why we're doing it a million times, where you do a harness conversion 50 times in one day. So that way tomorrow when you can't see, you're going to be able to do it. And
it's the same thing with like bailout, and I'm a supporter of bailout systems. I just wish that we could practice it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because it's and I think in New York we're required to do 2 jumps every 6 months, or maybe that's just us. But like we need to get better at doing that, so it's muscle memory, because and it's just it's always just aggravated me so much, Pat, that I make no doubt that like I exercise my Second Amendment rights to defend myself if I need to, and like there's a lot of training that goes into that.
Yeah.
I need to deploy the bailout system in the same way that I deploy that self-protection, because that's what it is. And do we train to that muscle memory?
Yeah.
And it's thankfully I have a really, really sharp guy, Terry Lane, who's created a bailout prop for us. So now hopefully we got new systems from crap, I can't remember who we got them from. But it's just like the same thing with the RIT under fire. And I really wish that we would have an adult come in the room, blow the whistle, and be like, okay, the rules say this, and we're not doing this because some people died under some really stupid circumstances.
Yeah.
But in this controlled environment, we need to use an actual firefighter who is experienced with a safe word and everything else to package them and get them out, because like that. And that was the one thing I was able to do in Tennessee at Firehouse Expo. And I think it was 2016, was that I actually got to utilize real people.
Yeah.
Like they had rescue firefighters from like Knoxville, Nashville, and Memphis. Like these were top jakes. Like they were salty as fuck.
Yeah.
But like it was perfect. And then like afterwards they would give you the feedback. Like I remember one guy, he came right up to me. I thought he was going to deck me, but he grabbed me by the shoulder strap and says, "I'm a real fucking person. Like, you cannot bend me that way."
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, "Oh shit!" Like, because you don't.
Yeah.
It's just Sorry for that diatribe there.
No, actually, you brought up an awesome point. So my first experience with live down firefighters was actually at the Syracuse Heavy Rescue Conference back. I forget, it was the first annual one with Augie and all them. But I had taken the RIT class. Anytime I go to a conference, I try to jump in a RIT class to see if there's something new. And so I took that class, and I'm good friends with one of the guys that was teaching, Justin Unisic from Boston. And he's like, "Oh, wait till you see what we have in store." And there was no live fire, but they made the course so challenging that it was like, oh my God. And Justin was the first down firefighter that I had to drag. So I remember being like pushing. I was at the feet, I'm pushing it, and obviously I could talk to him because he was conscious, but I'm like, this is just so much different than dragging around a little mannequin. And then so we started incorporating some of that, and I know they've done different ones. I remember trying to lift another Boston guy out of a hole, and just remembering like, hey, I could do this with a mannequin bike. It's just that dead weight. You did an awesome job of just going limp. And it just brings a whole new challenging factor that you can't get with mannequins. So it's, and then I took a search class actually at Boston. I remember dragging around Kenny Hayes just as a civilian and just the challenging aspect of that. And he had a jumpsuit on and he's like, you can't use clothes. So just in all these different techniques of using big bodies or big bones to be able to control somebody. And these drags that just don't work with a live person that doesn't have clothes on.
Right.
And it was hugely.
There's no straps back here on a live person.
No,
right?
No, exactly. And even trying to find your webbing and all that stuff. And it's like, oh, like just changing around stuff after that. But one of the things that we did incorporate, so whenever we go and teach with Rusty, like there's a couple of different ones I didn't do the last time because I was still hurting. But I was the live firefighter for a couple of scenarios. And and I'm not a small dude. So it was trying to challenge him. And to your point where he's like, I'm a live person, you can't bend me that way. I went limp and just let them do whatever they want. It cost me a week or two. I was definitely hurt. I got punched in areas I don't want to be punched in. And I got dropped on my head down the stairs a couple times, but it's every single person's like, I've never had to do that with a live person. And there's things that come away from it, of things that work, things that don't work. I remember we teach them to check for somebody's air to see if they have air. You can either peel back their face piece or grab the regulator and pull just real quick just to see if there's a shot of air. And I remember sitting there and one of the kids did that to me. And it came off like a half an inch. And then as they were dragging me down the stairs, the whole mask came off. And I was like, not going to teach that method anymore. Like I didn't realize that. Like he didn't realize that when he pulled it up and it went over my nose. So as he dragged me down the stairs, everything came off rather than just open the purge and just see if there's air. If you can't see the regulator or anything like that. So just little things from that. I think we can learn so much more from having an actual down firefighter. And again, I completely understand why we can't with the construction of NFPA and all that stuff, but conferences and all that stuff is where you get that kind of added benefit. And like you said, we're doing the skills a million times and jumping a million times and all that stuff. I've had people come up to me after bailout classes up in Maine and been like, that's the first time I've ever done that. Because they just didn't. Yeah. And so it's crazy to think about that. The American Fire Service is world renowned for our tactics and all that stuff. And then we have like that stuff going on where you can go 30 years and not jump out a window. And it's like, wow, it's eye opening.
Yeah. And it's funny too, the technology that changed. I'm pretty sure it's Petzl that we're using now for our bailout system.
Yeah.
But the old one, like we stopped doing window bailouts because people were getting severely hurt from the old one, like to go down, you squeezed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you really squeezed, you accelerated to the ground.
Yeah.
And, I mean, just you're only doing it 2 times a year. So it's 2 times a year. Somebody's like, oh, hey, how do you tie this harness again around the guy? Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's like this, and I was it's like this guy once on me. And I remember coming out the window and I thought I was going to hang myself.
Yeah.
And it just, like I said, there's all sorts of things that happened. And and now we don't have those. I mean, the system definitely has made the world a difference because that was the other thing. Like, you don't do this other than 2 times a year. Your natural inclination is going to be to grab onto something if you're not training for it. And that, and then I took a real quick ride to one day and the system caught me, but still it's all good things. I digress. So,
yeah. I just heard that there's a new one coming out that they released at FDIC this year from Sterling.
Mm-hmm. So maybe it's Sterling. Yeah, that's sorry. Yeah. Sterling's what we got.
Yeah, there's another one. I forget what it's called, the Ghost maybe or something like that. But we're sending a couple people up to do the trainer, so we can teach it.
Just on RIT quickly.
Yeah.
To kind of wrap up because we've been going for over an hour here. What are some of the shortfalls that you see? as you're doing, and then you don't have to throw anybody under the bus, and please don't. But like, what are some of the shortfalls that you see for RIT? If you got a RIT team, or you're watching people come on a fire ground, and you're just like, ooh, you're missing, or maybe I don't know if it's a mindset thing, but like, what's a shortfall that you see?
So I think it comes. I mean, it's actually in the lecture I tossed together too. For the fools, I think we have the bad habit of putting the wrong people on RIT, or like the old adage of like, oh, they're never going to go to work, so we're going to put the person I don't want inside the building is going to be out RIT. And I think we're pushing away from that, and we've gotten to a point where I think everybody understands that's not the best plan of action, because if I'm in trouble, I want the person that's been to the academy for 80 classes or training me on this or teaches this stuff to be out there. And as much as it sinks losing them inside the fire, I want them just in case. But you can tell right away, and I'm not going to go off any specific instances just for personal reasons, but just as simple as having your stuff squared away, your gear, your tools, knowing what to grab, because you're going to park far enough away. Having a pack on, having your gear. I know this sounds silly, but having your accountability tags, having everything, checking in with instant command. One thing I taught during the size up thing is, especially coming from a small town, you have a ride for RIT because you're going to go mutual aid, or mutual aid's coming to you. So you're going to have a 10, 15-minute ride. So if you as an officer come up to the instant commander with everything ready to go, all your tools, and be like, hey, we're here, we're RIT, you hand over your accountability tags. First of all, you're already showing that you're prepared. If you're double checking, like, hey, just verifying, I was listening to the radio. And so is engine 2 still on the second floor? Yeah, they're on the second floor. Is ladder 1 still doing a search? Yeah. Being able to verify that information as to who's doing what and who's where, and if there's any updates, you're already showing that you're being progressive and listening to that stuff. And that is, to me, is going to make the world of difference for that instant commander, knowing that you're taking it seriously, as opposed to arriving with one of your members doesn't even have their turn-up gear on, or you don't have all your accountability tags, or you don't have the right equipment or anything like that. I think it's going to be that difference of, they're going to look at that and be like, all right, they're squared away. If one of my members goes down, they're going to get them, like, because they take this seriously. So again, not talking any certain circumstance, but having a crew do the complete opposite of that instant commander is going to have no faith in them. And if you look at Project Mayday, they asked the down firefighters their confidence level in different people on the fire ground, and they had like a 90. I can't think of the numbers. It's on my computer that I'm using right now. They have like a 90% confidence rate in their company officer and their instant commander, and then it drops down to like 17% confidence in RIT. I think that's one thing that we need to change as far as RIT goes, is we want people taking it seriously, and not that we're doom and gloom and expect the worst, but I mean, us as a fire service, that's what we're there for. We're not there to not go to work that day. And the same thing goes for RIT. You're not there hoping something happens to them, but you're sure as hell going to be ready for it. And show everybody else that you're ready for it. And like I said, just something as simple as having your shit squared away. I'm sorry, having your stuff squared away.
No, you can say shit. It's all right.
All right. Yeah. Having it squared away and showing that instant commander, that mutual aid chief, that you might not necessarily know that you're ready to go and you're taking it seriously, I think is going to mean the world of difference, and then start acting appropriately and being prepared to be deployed. So.
Very well said. All right, we got to wrap up here, Pat. But where can people find you?
I'm all over social media. None of my stuff is private, I don't think. I've had students reach out to me on social media asking questions about classes and all that stuff. So I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I don't really.
What's your Instagram handle?
I think it's PA Smith 90. Let me double check it. Yeah, PA Smith 90. So PA Smith 90. And super common name. So should be very easy to find on Facebook. But I'm only kidding. Let me see. If you look on Facebook right now, I have the old Mike Clark photo, but usually it's a picture of me and my 3 kids from one of the parades. But yeah, I've a bunch of mutual friends from all over. So from traveling, I've met a bunch of people. So usually people from any of the conferences can find me pretty quick.
All right. Anything that you got to plug that's coming up?
What's up?
Anything you have to plug that's coming up? You teaching? You got a Fools event coming up? Spring Fling Winter Fire School, or clam chowder bake off? I don't know. What do you got?
So I've been doing a lot of the stuff at the academy. I don't think there's anything scheduled right now with Rusty, but there's usually a bunch of stuff. I think we have the Wells conference, the lecture series up in March, which is an awesome one. That's where I met you. I know he's
or at least you met me before I threw up in the parking lot.
I think before and after.
Yeah, we might have had a lot to drink that night.
That was a fun night. But no, there's nothing right now. Unfortunately, this year I've slowed my schedule way down. Had some personal changes in my life, and just can't afford to travel right now. So unfortunately, as much as I'd love to go to all these conferences, I love traveling and seeing everybody. I had a bunch of big plans this year, and I think Pensacola was the last big trip I had for
ODP.
I think no, it was the year that you were down there. I went to 4 of them that year. I had to bail on High Rise Conference because I was injured, but I think that was one of the last big trips. And then the only thing I have going right now that is taking up a lot of my time is EFO. So I'll be going down there to graduate in April or May, hopefully, as long as I pass my paper.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you do well. Dot your T's and cross your I's.
So. Yeah, and then I get that fancy little paper, and then I can go back to traveling a little bit more, and hopefully. But yeah, I've been able to. We just did 2 days in Auburn, Mass, with Rusty. That was great. Engine truck stuff. I did thermal imagers and fire behavior, and then I know we usually do a bunch of RIT stuff and a bunch of engine company stuff. I think he's checking out a place this month for an upcoming one, but don't have dates yet. But we pop up every now and then. Social media is awesome. Again, just follow everything. And usually I try to post as much as I can. I've been kind of slow this year with it and try to stay off social media, but this year. But I'll get back at it.
Well, Pat, thank you for coming on Frontline Mindset tonight. I got to take us off here, hang out for a minute, just once we stop the show here, so we can just catch up on a couple housekeeping things. But everybody, thank you for joining me tonight. This is Rob, National Fire Radio with Frontline Mindset. Captain Patrick Smith, Marshfield, Massachusetts. Pat, thank you for coming on the show, talking about all things RIT and everything else in between. I appreciate you, brother.
Thanks for having me,
everybody. And yeah, no problem, man. This is awesome. And everybody stay safe out there. We'll catch you on the next one.
National Fire Radio.